Hello everyone, Mike Lechave here. Welcome back to the channel, Aquascapeodyssey channel that is. Today I'm super excited to talk about my adventure into upgrading my low maintenance tank. If you haven't seen the build video, there is going to be a little link up here at the top right. When I essentially made this tank, I wanted it to be exactly what it was from a low maintenance tank perspective. But then I saw a bunch of Instagram, YouTube videos, and I'm like, man, I just really want this tank to pop in terms of the plants, the colors, everything within the tank. So this is my adventure from going from a low-tech setup, only being in the aquascaping world. Back then it was about, because this tank has been running for 3 months, but back then it was probably like 7 months in the hobby. So this is going to be me venturing into the higher tech end of tanks, still keeping that low maintenance kind of mantra because I don't have time to go through and maintain my tanks. So we'll go through and talk about that as well. But enough about that. Let's hop on in and learn how I upgraded my low tech 20-gallon tank into a high tech tank. Alrighty, so let's talk about the story. So first, when we started out with a low light. One of the main features I wanted to have was Rotala Super Reds. I also ended up getting Liguidias as well. Reds, as you can see them starting to grow, and then the Rotala starting to take off as well. They were all taking off regardless with my other tank. They just weren't, light tank. They just weren't as vibrant in colors. The light I had on before, and you'll see a video cut right now, you'll see that the Rotalas were more of an orange, the Super Reds. They weren't a deep red environment. They weren't a deep red colorization in the plants themselves. But what I did is I had this Twin Star A series. This is the light that I had before. It wasn't as dense in terms of the depth, the hues of the lights as well, in terms of the LEDs, didn't really pop the Super Reds as deep as I wanted them to be red, right? You see a ton of videos. Right now this is unedited, there is no filter. Those are extremely red. We'll also show you some cuts throughout this video of it inside. But without further ado, I upgraded the light. First and foremost, that's where I went, talking with people in the hobby, specifically one of the general managers over at Kona Reef here, local in Arizona. I'm like, well, what is a high-tech tank, right? Especially for freshwater. Now, saltwater is a whole different game, but I was just questioning him and trying to understand what that meant. So lighting is one. So I upgraded my light first and foremost to the Trajeros lighting. The one that I ended up getting for it is this one right here. Oh, it's upside down. The WRGB2 Slim. So that was my first upgrade. That happened about a month into having this. Oh, I keep hitting the camera. About a month having this tank, I ended up upgrading the light. That truly darkened all of my reds. So all of the reds were extremely vibrant, I'm trying to think of the word for it, and popping in the density of the colors that they had for them. That right there was enough. Just little tip. When you get the Trajeros lighting or any high-tech lighting, be aware of your light settings. I set mine to 100%, all different color hues, and I had algae break. And that finally subsided, but it didn't subside not only from me reducing the percentages. So my lighting, if you are looking into Trajeros and you finally get the app, there are percentages of the light density. It goes from 0 to 100%. I lowered mine to 80%. That helped combat the algae breakout problem. I had hair algae growing everywhere. So that was the first point. And then I also started adding Excel after talking and reaching out to some people on Instagram as well. I was very fearful of using Excel just because my main goal, my main ethos of getting into this was shrimp. So I have Caridina shrimp in here and Neocaridina shrimp in here. So I was all really worried that that would affect them. But if you do it in low amounts, low doses, I dose mine 2 mils, extremely fine, and I spot dose with those 2 mil every day, the area that it was and where it was. And you'll see clips right here. I had a ton of hair algae growing off of my bulbitis, had to think of the name, and even just on the wood itself, right? So it just started growing, started taking off. The plants didn't have enough time to grow because it was a new scape. So we have that cycling issue of first setting up a tank and it just spread. It's finally under control now, but again, reducing that light setting first and foremost. And then I got to thinking, I'm already kind of halfway there, because really the next step into upgrading your low-tech tank to a high-tech tank, one would be the lighting, two would be adding CO2. And I'm not a genius by any means for chemistry, right? So I was kind of worried. I don't want to have to go and fill up, right? I don't have time to even maintain these tanks in terms of going through and doing active maintenance weekly. I typically do a 3-week to a month maintenance, and that's just trimming and replanting, and if I need to, cleaning out the filter. And of course, cleaning the glass. You can check out my 5 must-have tools when you're setting up your tank or even just aquascaping beginners. But enough of that. Next step is CO2. So I did a ton of research. I've seen a ton, even looking at MD's videos. He talks about some of his CO2 tanks that you can get, but I couldn't find his brand that he uses and recommends out here in the States. So what I finally found and ended up being easy to use was the Forza. You'll see a link. I always forget the names. I should be better, but I'm not with the names, I'm sorry. But you'll see a link or what it is here. That's the brand that I ended up getting for CO2. This one's already full. I didn't really show how to set up. I will when I break this down. As you can tell, it's got enough CO2 to last a little bit longer. Once it's done, I'll show you all how to do this. But I loved how on MD tanks, how he was able to just fill it up himself. That's what I wanted. I don't want to have to go anywhere, get a new tank. This has been a game changer for that. But let's talk about how we set this up. How do we get into CO2 and what are the benefits of CO2? So I was getting red popping from my plants and growth, not super fast, not accelerated, but growth, and reds from the lighting. The lighting, I think, is the most important part to get deep reds. I do not think it's just CO2. I think the majority of it comes from the growth of photosynthesis from the light density that's penetrating the water. So lighting first. Second, for high-tech tanks, sorry, I coughed. For high-tech tanks would be the instance of CO2. And what this does is it supercharges in terms of growth for your plants themselves. You'll see this Liguidia here. You'll see a video right now showing it was 1 week before not even sprouted out that high. Now, as we're cutting back to this, it has grown all the way up to about, I would say, 3 to 4 inches in height. In addition to some of my other stem plants in the back, in addition to my moss and some of my ricotta, everything just grows faster. I will say, kind of circling back, because I didn't really add to it, one of the other main reasons I had a huge algae breakout is I was adding essentially nutrients to inform my plants. I was supplementing nutrients. I was using the API for nutrients, the API leaf zone, just too much. I had too much in my tank, too much fueling, and not enough plant growth to consume the nutrients, which then also induced algae breakout as well. And again, highly recommend Excel, low doses, read the chart, because you don't want to overdose, especially if you're more worried about the inhabitants. If you're just starting the tank, just cycling it, that too. You can dose it completely. I also had an algae inhibitor from Twinstar. I think it's Twinstar, yeah. And that helped kind of mitigate, doesn't eliminate. So that would have been great if I started with that when the tank first initiated, because it actually eliminates the kind of algae spores in your tank. But anyways, how do we and what do we need to get CO2? So you do need a CO2 reader because you don't want to gas anything that's in your tank. I have one here. You can get one. I got this off Amazon. It was like 10 bucks. I'm not going to even pronounce the name of what this is, but this is great. It comes with the reader. So essentially this is sitting in the water. The water doesn't go into here because the gas fills up into here. And then of course there are some, it's like a dye. And basically it just chemically reacts with the CO2 in the tank, and it tells you your levels, like low, this is ideal, this is bad. You need one of these to make sure, especially if you have things in your tank, you're not gassing everything in your tank with CO2. Next, with your CO2 tank, it will come with this little hook, essentially. You can get basically, what are these called again? A diffuser. So you can get a diffuser that goes all the way up, but basically they give you, when you purchase this brand, it's FC, I think it's Forza, I don't know, you just saw it. But basically this hooks over, and be careful, this thing is super delicate. I recommend purchasing a couple extras just in case. I ended up breaking my first one just because they are delicate, especially when you're using the tube lining. But I highly recommend getting a different diffuser because the one it comes with is super cheap. Basically it doesn't bubble enough. And I put this in just because I couldn't wait. Who can wait? I mean, some of us may be able to wait for the better diffuser. Like if you look at the reviews, it tells you the diffuser is terrible. And I don't disagree with that. The bubbles come up from one side. It's not equal distribution of it. But for this one, essentially your tube comes down and attaches to it. CO2 comes in, releases, and it diffuses through. It's kind of like porous, and the pressure releases bubbles in a less dense matter, or a more dense matter, right? Because there's more bubbles. Not good. So you can order a better one online, and that's what I did for this one, and I'm gonna install it now. I took it out, was waiting, basically created this video and kind of took advantage of creating this video and unplugging my current CO2 system, but essentially need one of these. They're online. This is the F-Zone. That's what it's called. Forza. What was I thinking? F-Zone. Neo CO2 diffuser. That's the one I use. This one is a large for my 20-gallon tank. You also want a check valve. I haven't used one because my tanks they're already low. Like for you all that haven't seen like my setup in here in the studio, this is probably about 12 inches off the ground. So I don't have much lateral movement if water were to go back in. But anyways, so how do you set this up? Essentially, this top will be unscrewed. There's something that you screw into the bottom of it. It does come with instructions. The one thing I did have to research is how does this work to here? This comes with everything you need. If you didn't want to buy a subdiffuser, you didn't need to buy a subdiffuser. The only thing you do need, I guess, in addition to this would be a timer. So I use Go Sound, I think it's called. I'll put a link up to turn it on and off. I turn mine on an hour before. And don't worry, when we get a little bit further, I'll tell you what the benefit is of CO2. I guess I kind of skipped that. But yeah, turn it on an hour before, and then an hour before, and then an hour before your lights shut off. Because essentially, what you have with this is that it will turn on, and it's not filling up the tube yet when it's on because it has to create pressure. So by the time your lights kick on, it has the full amount of pressure, and now it's releasing CO2 into your system, into your tank. What I did find out too, it's better to not use water because the water is not as dense. So I use mineral oil. You can look it up online. I'll put it down in the description as well. That's what I filled up with. Do not fill it up all the way. So when you're looking at this, if you fill it up to the top, because in the air, CO2, not the air, pushes the mineral oil into the line. You just need to hear, this is the bubble counter, essentially how many bubbles you're counting to see if you need to reduce it or up it. The only one thing I do have a complaint about is that this is a little bit touchy, so it's not like a click or anything. So just watch when you use screw or unscrew it for however much. But essentially with how you fill this thing up is it doesn't come with cool little packets like the one if you ever watch MD. His comes with like already pre-mixed packets on what you need to add. This comes with a measure and a funnel, and you just purchase baking soda and citric acid. That's it. And I think I paid like 10 bucks for both, not like total. And that allows me to make as much as I want. So again, don't have to go anywhere. Once this is empty, I'm gonna unscrew it, refill it, and we're good to go. And this has been running for probably about a month. All right, so enough about this. We're gonna cut into looking into the tank versus me talking here. So what does it do? It essentially, CO2 allows you to excel the growth in your plants. Now, that being said, that is what I was looking for. I wanted gorgeous, quick growing plants, and you can get quick growing plants, don't get me wrong, but the plants that I was getting was more aquascape front. I wanted this tank to be my showpiece for my Instagram channel. And I'm not saying you can't have a showpiece with a low-tech tank, don't get me wrong, you totally can. But in terms of vibrancy and popping of color, you definitely will want a higher light, or, well, you still need higher light with CO2. You just get more growth with CO2, quicker growth. Now, if you have a high light, you're still gonna get the same popping of reds. And right now you can check out my lighting video to talk about the different lightings that I've gotten, purchased, and true and tried. Again, Churros by itself gives you the deep pops of red. Now, if you want to enhance the growth of your plants within your tank, then what you're gonna need to go through and do is get CO2. You can treat it with fertilizers like I was talking about earlier, but I did that and there was too much in the tank. You can spot treat with specific fertilizer like potassium and all that. That's just too much for me. So instead, I went the CO2 route, and I'm getting everything I wanted just by having CO2 and lighting. Now, once everything starts to get to that medium growth and I'm just trimming, no more CO2 on this tank. But I wanted to excel the growth so that you all can kind of see what the benefits are. I think it's great for starting up a tank if you do not have larger stem plants or plants to put in your tank. Excelling that growth, CO2. To get deep reds, just the lighting, in my opinion. That's all you need. But as you're going through and looking at this tank, this has completely changed from what it was before, and you'll see a cut where it was before in terms of when I just started out, and then in between. You'll also see as well some algae areas. So I'll take this time right now to show you where that algae growth happened. It was all over the wood. It was all over some of my plants, my epiphytes. I was gonna just pull everything out. But then again, someone reached out to me on Instagram and told me about it. I forget his Instagram handle. You'll see it as well. I'll throw it up right here too. And he was like, yeah, stop using ferts, man, too much. And I was like, oh, great, thanks for telling me. That's why my algae growth happened with a high density light. And then I started treating it with Excel. So thank you for recommending the Excel. Again, just don't overdose it. So if you're in the States, you can get Excel. Don't overdose it if you're worried about your inhabitants, but do overdose it in terms of what it says by the label. Use the full amount that's recommending when you start it up. If you're not worried about your inhabitants, like, fish would be fine. But again, yeah. So just being aware of that. So I upgraded my low-tech tank into a high-tech tank. Let's recap my adventure on. Essentially, I wanted to create denser colorization in my reds. Lighting, 100%. Most use case and reason I think in my experience, why plants get more of that dense red. Second would be CO2 for growth. So if you want to enhance the growth, you can use fertilizers by all means. Everyone uses fertilizer. If you look at their Instagrams, they have like these crazy scapes. They'd be lying if they didn't. They use fertilizers, or they use CO2 and fertilizers. So I just don't use fertilizers. I only use CO2, and I've been able to grow this thing out in under 2 weeks from using CO2. I trimmed everything down right when I started using CO2 and just excelled that growth to new, vibrant growth, especially with the algae being gone. So it's not fighting plants against the algae growth, fighting for nutrients. Everything is just amazing now. But enough about that. If you do have any questions, or you're venturing into this new high-tech world like I did, and again, this is the only tank I'm running CO2 on. When I get ready to start up my other 10-gallon tank, it's like 12 gallons, but I'm gonna call it 10 because everything in it. That will also start with CO2 and the algae inhibitor that I got from Twin Star. But recapping, if you do have any questions, or you do have experience, I think that's another thing. If you use specific fertilizer, I know some people use like 2-hour Aquarius fertilization, some use like API, put them in the comments. Helps everybody out, may help me out. Maybe I will decide to put some fertilization in here. I just don't want another algae breakout. And CO2 has been doing the trick. But again, I truly appreciate every single one of you tuning in. If you haven't liked this video yet, please like it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Helps out the channel, and I truly appreciate every single one of you tuning into this and all of my other videos. And again, until next time, I'll see you all then.